Good evening and welcome to the first Monday of the month. So now I'm just waiting on you. Every first Monday of the month, I'm going to be sure to go live and do our live talks with Dr. Macie unless something comes up. So I'm happy that it's the first Monday in October and I'm able to spend it with you this evening. So come on in and get your questions ready. I am the social gerontologist helping you and your families reach the next best level of care. If you're caring for someone living with dementia, I want to know where you are joining us from, what questions you have, what concerns you have, and hopefully I'm able to provide you with the support that you need. Tonight, we're going to be talking about some signs of dementia that you might not consider to be dementia. We typically think that dementia is just memory loss and forgetfulness, but tonight we're going to talk about why it's much more than just memory loss. So, as you come into the live stream, let me know where you're joining from, your city, your state, your area. I'm looking forward to chatting with you this evening. Let me know if you can hear me and see me well. If you're having concerns with the audio or the video, please let me know. All right. We're good to go. So drop your questions in the chat. Let me know where you're joining from, your city, your state, your area. I'm looking forward to chatting with you all tonight about your caregiving experiences. If you are caring for someone living with dementia, let me know how your journey is going. Let me know what support you need. I'm going to be sure that I provide you as much support as I can. This is a member priority chat, which means as members chime in and ask questions, I will respond to those questions first. If you're not a member, you can still drop your questions in. Hopefully, I'll be able to get to it tonight. But you can also hit the join button and join our channel so that way you can have untethered access to member only videos, member only links to resources that you can access immediately. And you also have access to some private sessions if you choose to. But there are different levels. You can choose a level that you would like that's most comfortable for you at the moment. And you can change at any given point in time. So as you are joining us tonight, let me know where you're joining from, your name and where you're joining from. I'm Dr. Macie. I'm going to be providing you support for your caregiving journey, caring for someone living with dementia. I want to remind you that Buck and Buck is an adaptable apparel company for those living with dementia, for seniors, and also those with disabilities. It helps to make the dressing process a lot more seamless, a lot less stressful. You can cut your dressing time from some of y'all take about an hour to get your loved ones dressed. You can cut that time in half with this adaptable apparel. It's buckandbuck.com. I'm going to put the link on the screen for you. Just so you know, you all here get 15% off your order when you type in Dr. Macie 15 when you check out, or you can just click that link. So Buck and Buck is your adaptable apparel for those living with dementia, those with disabilities, and seniors who just need a little bit of help with getting dressed. Thank y'all for joining. Thank you for coming in. I appreciate you all tonight. So it's the first Monday of the month. This is Live Talks with Dr. Macie. Drop your questions in the chat if you're providing care for someone living with dementia and you just need some guidance. This is a member priority chat. Members will have their questions answered first. And then if we have time, we will get to the other questions. So now let's talk about how dementia is much more than memory loss. Typically, people associate those living with dementia when they start to forget things. But there are a couple of other signs and just warning signals that you could possibly experience, you yourself, or when you're caring for someone else, that could lead to a diagnosis of dementia. We're going to talk about those tonight, those signs and symptoms that people just don't think about. It actually goes over your head, or you think is normal aging memory impairment, which is a thing. There is a thing called normal aging memory impairment, which means that you are forgetting things or you're becoming confused about things, but it's natural. Maybe because of stress, maybe because of lack of sleep. So those are the things that is normal aging, memory impairment, you can retrace your steps, it's a non-issue. But we're going to talk about when it becomes an issue. When your memory loss and your forgetfulness start to impair your life and your day-to-day and things that you've always been able to do and things you love to do, you can't do them because of the dementia that is progressing. Um, we're going to talk about a couple of those things tonight. Once you've met one person living with dementia, let me just say you've met that one person. No two people are exactly the same. It's very important that you understand who the person was prior to the disease, so that way you know what's different for them and what's not different for them. So the first sign and or symptom of possible dementia, early indication that people just don't think about, is language. So there's a part of the brain that manages speaking, and then there's a part of the brain that processes understanding language and understanding what you read. And so if you are accustomed to someone speaking a certain way, they may be a doctor, they may be a teacher, so they're using proper grammar. They're not using ebonics like I do sometimes. I just, I like to use ebonics sometimes because uh, I think it's relatable in certain situations, and I don't change the way I talk in any setting. I speak the way I need to speak during certain times, and other times I don't. But you got to know that about me to know if something is different. So if your loved one always spoke well and eloquently, subject verb agreement, never use slang, they're always on top of their game in terms of communicating. But now you're noticing that they're not using the larger words that they typically use, the more academic words. They're using smaller words, simpler words. They may even revert to using slang, and you're saying to yourself, "Oh, Auntie cool now," you know, or my wife is finally getting on board. She don't have to, act like that all the time. She's using the language of the millennials and the alpha babies. That may not be the case. It may be because she or he is forgetting the words that they're accustomed to using. Again, a lot of these signs and symptoms may revert to memory, or may really fall in line with memory and forgetfulness. But these are the outward signs and the behaviors that we see that we typically don't equate to dementia. So, language, are they speaking the way they've always spoken? Are they using the words they've always used? Are they using words now that your little cousin is using, or your grandchildren are using, and that's different for them? And you may chalk it up to, again, they must be tired, they're stressed, they don't feel up to it. But it may be that they're just not remembering the words, the larger words that they used to use. So the language changes. The second thing that you might not consider to be an early sign or symptom of a progressive type of dementia: executive functioning. So executive functioning is, you think about executive, that's a high level position, an executive in a company. So executive functioning is high level thinking. So when we think about high level thinking, we think about problem solving, we think about making choices. So if someone is having concerns with executive functioning, and that will typically lead to concerns with instrumental activities of daily living. Instrumental activities of daily living are things like balancing the checkbook, making choices about what to cook for dinner, actually cooking dinner, making a bed, cooking a pot of coffee, making a pot of coffee. So decision making. What's happening is, whatever disease or condition that's causing dementia, the outward signs that you see, is causing that person to forget the steps involved in performing this particular task, this instrumental activity of daily living. So we may think, okay, they're messing up on their bank account because, again, going back to normal age memory impairment, they're just tired or they don't feel like doing it anymore. No, they may be messing up on their checkbooks because they can't figure out the numbers. They can't figure out the higher level of processing and making decisions about adding and subtracting. Now, don't use that to gauge whether or not I'm having some issues cognitively, because I don't balance a checkbook at all. Math is not my forte. And I'm not afraid to admit it. It just takes me a little time to make sure my numbers are right. And because I don't feel like doing that, I just don't do it at all. So I actually look at my bank statement online or my online bank account. That's how I balance my checkbook. So again, you got to know your people. If your loved one always balance that checkbook to the penny, and now those numbers and those figures are all over the place, that could potentially be a sign of dementia, a progressive type of dementia. Because as you all know from being a part of the channel and being a part of the Doc Squad, dementia is the umbrella term. It's a global term, and there are more than 100 causes or 100 types of dementia. Alzheimer's disease is the most common type. That's the one that you'll see commonly referred to Alzheimer's disease. But the second most common type is vascular dementia. The third most common type is dementia with Lewy bodies. The fourth most common type is frontotemporal dementia. So first, there's language changes that you may not equate to dementia. Then there's problems with executive functioning, making decisions, making choices about what to cook for dinner, actually cooking dinner. I'll tell you, my grandmama would bake cakes. She called it sweetbread. She never called it sweetbread before she had dementia, but after she developed dementia, she started calling cake sweetbread because she couldn't remember the word cake. But I missed that. I just thought she was just being fancy and wanted to use a fancy word, sweetbread. But her cakes were always delicious, but they started tasting funny. They started tasting funny because she started forgetting the ingredients that she would put in the cake in the process of making the cake. Because you got to beat it, a little longer over here, shorter over here, and then you got to whip it over here. Whip it. I don't bake. Okay, I barely cook, so I don't know. But there's a process, and my grandmama, she's a traditionalist. She was born in the 20s. They didn't measure anything. So she could not teach me how to bake a cake. I don't even think she really wanted to teach me how to bake a cake, but it was all up here. They don't have recipes. And so if it's all up here and they develop a progressive type of dementia, then what's up here is going to start to fade and dissipate. So they're going to start missing the steps. So the third most common the third most common symptom of dementia that you may not equate to dementia is apathy. So apathy is when someone stops doing the things that they love to do. My grandmama loved to go fishing in the creek. I'm from the country, so we don't have large bodies of water near where we're from. So it was, the little lakes, it wasn't even the lake, it was like a pond. She would like to go to the pond to fish. Well, she stopped wanting to go to the pond to fish, and she would just say, I don't want to go. And that wasn't like her. If your loved one loves to go to church, but now all of a sudden they don't want to go to church anymore, and you think it may be depression, and it may be depression, but it may be that because of the dementia that they're experiencing and how it's progressing, it's too much stimulation. It's too much stimulation with this particular activity in terms of the people that's involved in the activity. If it's a lot of noise, again, a lot of people, a lot of steps are involved in completing this task, or they may not even understand fishing. What is that? That's complex. What is going to church? That's complex thinking. So they may not perform these tasks because of this overstimulation and their inability to process the entire activity and all that's involved in it. You have a loved one who actually loved to read. Like that was their thing. That was their pastime, reading. But now they don't want anything to do with reading. And again, you may consider it depression, and it may be depression, but it may be dementia as well. They may stop reading because the words, it's too many letters, it's too many words. And I'm reading these words and reading these sentences and statements, and I cannot make sense of it. That doesn't mean they can't read. They can still read, but remember I told you earlier on, there's a part of the brain that manages understanding what you read. And because they're having difficulty connecting what they read to the understanding piece, because what's causing dementia is affecting that part of the brain now, They just don't read because they can't understand it. They can't connect with it. They're no longer satisfied. They're no longer satisfied with reading because they can't understand it. They're not going to tell you that because many of our seniors who are living with dementia are not only seniors, those individuals who are living with dementia, they will probably hide what they're forgetting and what they're not remembering because again, they don't want to have it. That's number 1. They don't want their life to be interrupted, and then they don't want to be a burden to you. So a lot of times they do hide what they don't remember or what they can't comprehend or understand. So some of the signs and symptoms of dementia that you may not consider signs and symptoms. We talked about language changes. Then we talked about concerns with executive function, being able to make high level decisions such as balancing the checkbook and making choices. And then apathy, not wanting to do the things that they've always loved to do all day, every day. And that's because they can't make sense of it. They can't understand it, or it's overstimulating. Another sign and or symptom of a progressive type of dementia that you may not consider is a sign and symptom of dementia is personality changes. And I'm going to tell you, that's why a lot of people associate mental health concerns with dementia. They put it in a bucket together. Those are two different things. Now, someone who has dementia may absolutely have some mental health concerns or some behavioral health concerns because it does affect a person's brain. It affects their cognitive ability and it affects their mental acuity. However, that's not the primary diagnosis. It's the primary diagnosis would be whatever is causing dementia. And then they may be having some behavior challenges. Some docs will diagnose individuals with dementia with behavioral disturbances, or they may diagnose them with Alzheimer's with behavior disturbances. Now, if they don't know what type of dementia the person has, they're going to say dementia with behavioral disturbances. But there are a lot of times you can actually figure out through behavioral not behavior management, but behavioral processing to determine why the person is having these challenging behaviors or these burdensome or problem behaviors. There's something causing it, but there's a part of the brain that manages emotions. And so if the disease that's causing dementia is affecting that part of the brain, they may have extreme highs and extreme lows with no apparent triggers. In the morning, they may be happy and joyful and really happy to see you. They want to do things and go places. But 3 o'clock, that whole mood has changed. And you may say, oh, since mama has gotten old, she is just moody. Well, that may not be the case. She may be dealing with a form of dementia. So we talked about language changes. We talked about concerns with executive functioning, apathy, and then we just talked about personality changes or mood changes when there are no apparent triggers. That is because the part of the brain that's managing their emotions is kind of all over the place. So you got to think about what the brain actually does and the functions of the brain. When you better understand the functions of the brain, then you can kind of understand these particular behaviors. If a person is dealing with a form of dementia, number 5, they may also have problems getting to sleep and staying asleep. What we know is that when someone's brain is deteriorating, it increases anxiety and it actually affects their ability to sleep well. So, being able to sleep for 8 hours, 7, 8 hours for adults, because that's the recommended amount of sleep. Many recommended amount of hours to sleep, 7 to 8 hours of sleep. Because they have a progressive type of dementia, they're not able to get to sleep and to stay asleep. And as the disease progresses, we find that their sleep patterns change. So those are 5 signs and symptoms of dementia that you may not consider that is not memory loss. Now, it is probably connected to forgetfulness and memory loss. However, it is because the disease is attacking that particular part of the brain that manages that particular behavior or that response. So when I say and when you hear that dementia is much more than memory loss, it absolutely is. Any questions? Pop your questions in the chat. I'm going to get to a few now before we log out. Let me know where you are chiming in from. Hi, Nicole. You said that's the one that your mom has. She has Alzheimer's dementia. And I am happy that you know what type she has, because there are many people who don't have a complete diagnosis of the type of dementia they have. The doctor just says dementia. And, the doctor can determine that it's dementia by doing the cognitive assessments and being able to establish baseline to determine what they were able to do before and what they're no longer able to do now. Alzheimer's disease, you typically see early recent memory loss. So they can remember 30 years ago, but they have trouble remembering the last 5 minutes, the last 10 minutes, the last day. But that's not everybody. Everybody does not have Alzheimer's disease, and everybody's Alzheimer's may not show up with recent memory loss. So definitely keep in mind the other five signs and symptoms that I shared with you tonight, because it may be that you're caring for someone now, or you're concerned about someone now who is having concerns with their language. They're speaking differently. They're not speaking like themselves. Now, again, if you are a type of person, or your loved one is the type of person who can, what we call, code switch, and can change that language up in a minute, change their wording, because that's who they are. That's definitely who I am. But they are not able to process the wording and the language in the way they used to. That could be something you want to talk with them about, and have them talk with their doctor about. But I encourage you, if you are a close relative and you're in line to provide care for your loved one, you want to be sure that you are on the HIPAA form. Make sure they have you on a HIPAA form. Make sure that you set up an electronic medical record or an electronic health record with your loved one, so that way you can have untethered access to their doctor. Now, you can't just go create one without their permission, unless you're the healthcare power of attorney, and that person has been adjudicated incompetent. Other than that, you still can't do it. So you want to work with them and talk with them about you setting up their electronic medical record, and also about you being listed on the HIPAA form. So that way you can, which is the medical form that you sign when you go to the doctor's office. So that way you can have a conversation with your loved one's doctor just about different changes that you see. A doctor practices medicine. The operative word is practice. The doctor does not know everything about you or your loved one. You know you and your loved one way better than any doctor does. So physicians are practicing medicine. Practicing is the operative word. You want to offer as much information as you can with the doctor. If your loved one does not have you on the HIPAA form, you don't have access to the doctor won't be able to tell you anything. However, you can tell the doctor stuff. Like, you can call and speak with the nurse and provide information that you want the doctor to talk with your loved one about. Because I'm going to tell you, when your loved one goes into that doctor's office, for those 5 minutes that they're in there, they are the sharpest people for those 5 minutes, because the disease itself waxes and wanes. Some days they're going to have good days, some days they're not. Some moments are going to be good, some moments are not. And those 5 minutes in that doctor's office, that's going to be the good moments. So you want to be able to share real time and realistic information with the doctor, not diagnosing the person, but providing information, with the doctor. So what questions do you have? Pop them in the chat. I'm going to bring them on screen, and I'm going to answer them as best as I can. And I will say, we're going to have a conversation soon about advanced care directives and advanced care planning and end of life planning. Many people get a little confused about what that is and what rights they have with those particular documents. I'll tell you, everybody wants to go to heaven, but don't nobody want to die. Everybody has an appointment. Everybody has an appointment. So you want to be sure that you have your documents in order prior to, so that way you won't have somebody else making the decision on your behalf, and it's the wrong person making the decisions on your behalf. So let me know what questions you have about caring for someone with dementia. If you're a family caregiver, if you're supporting a friend who's a family caregiver, if you have concerns about your loved one maybe possibly having dementia, let me know what your concerns are. If you don't want to pop your question here, that is perfectly fine. I have several videos on the channel. Please revisit those videos. Pop your questions there. I do check the comments. I do read them. I do respond. If you want to become a member of the channel, please click the join button so that way you can have access to me 24/7. You're able to schedule private live stream sessions where you and I actually speak about what you have going on, and I can provide you with resources. You can join at any level and you can discontinue at any given point in time. So I thank you all for joining me this evening as we address the early signs and symptoms of a progressive type of dementia that you just might not think about. So I appreciate your time. I don't take your time for granted at all. Continue to take care of your loved ones, but most importantly, continue to take care of yourself. You all have a good night.